Hello, this is Dr. Wright. I want to show you how to create a loan amortization table in Excel today. It's very simple to do, very straightforward. As a part of our spreadsheet today, we'll also figure out how you can determine the monthly payment associated with the loan, and we'll also figure out how much you could save by making extra payments each month. So that's our goal. We want to figure out how we can determine a monthly payment associated with a loan. We want to build the amortization table, and we want to see how making extra payments each month can actually save us quite a bit of money. Going to require some inputs here, and I've already kind of listed out the inputs. I'm building this spreadsheet from the perspective of the buyer. So I'm assuming that whoever's using this spreadsheet is making a purchase and that they're going to have to borrow money in order to make the purchase. If that's the case, here are the inputs that we need. We need to know the purchase price. We need to know what percentage of the purchase price the buyer is bringing in as a down payment. If we know that, then we can figure out how much needs to be financed. In other words, how much money do they need to borrow? We're going to need an annual percentage rate, an interest rate on the loan. We need to know how many years the loan will be paid off over, and we need to know how many payments will be taking place each year. So I've put in $200,000 as the purchase price. This is, I'm assuming somebody's buying a house, they're bringing 5% down. If that's the case, then this is a very simple formula right here to figure out how much money is being borrowed. And that formula is simply take the purchase price, multiply it by 1 minus the percentage that's being brought as a down payment, and that will give you exactly how much needs to be borrowed. Once you have all these inputs, then we can use a function here in Excel to determine what the monthly periodic payment will be. In order to do that, I'm just going to pull up a list of all of the functions in Excel. And you can see that if you go to Financial Functions and you scroll down in the Financial Functions, there is a PMT function. And that's the function that's going to actually calculate what your periodic payment will be on this loan. So we click on that, and it brings up a wizard. And the wizard will tell you exactly what it needs. So it needs a rate, which is the interest rate per period. And it gives you an example. For instance, use a 6% divided by 4 if you have quarterly payments at 6% APR. Well, we have 4.25% APR, and it's monthly payment. So we need to take 4.25% and divide it by 12 to get our periodic rate. NPER is the total number of payments for the loan. That's just 30 years times the 12 payments per year. The present value is the amount that we need to finance, so that's $190,000. The future value is 0 because we want to pay this loan off by the time we get to the end of the last payment. And type, as you can see here, is just a logical value. If the payment occurs at the beginning of the period, put a 1 here. If payment occurs at the end of the period, put a 0. Since our payment is occurring at the end of the period, we'll put a 0. You could leave it blank. And so Excel estimates that our monthly payment that will be required in order to pay off this loan at the end of 30 years is $934.69. Well, we can check this. So why don't we create an amortization table? This is not the final amortization table that I want us to use for this spreadsheet. This is just going to be what I would call a quick and dirty check to make sure that we've done this correctly. In order to create an amortization table, you're going to need a few columns. You're going to need to know all the periods. In each period, you're going to need to know what the beginning loan value is. You're going to need to know what the payment is in that period. You're going to need to know how much of that payment is interest, how much of it is principal, and then you're going to need to know what the ending loan value is. So for period, we're just going to run the period down to 360, and forgive me, I'm going to do this the slow way actually. There's a little bit more efficient way to do that, but we'll just do it like that for our purposes. Now, the beginning loan value, obviously in the first period, is this $190,000. The payment every period, according to what we have up here, every period the payment will be $934.69. So I'll lock that in, and by locking it in, that's going to allow us to just drag that formula down. Now, how much interest are we going to owe in this period? In order to figure out the interest, you need to take the beginning loan value and multiply it by the monthly equivalent of your APR. So that would be 4.25% divided by 12. Now I know that both the B6 and the B8 are in my input table, so they're going to need to be locked in in order for me to drag this formula down, so I lock them in. Well, once we know what our payment is and we know how much interest we owe each month, then we can figure out what portion of this payment is going to pay down principal. And we can see that the portion of our payment that's going to pay down the principal will be the difference between the payment and the interest. So I'm just going to take the payment plus the interest. I took the plus because the payment's a negative and the interest is a positive. And so that tells us how much principal is being paid down with this particular payment right here. So in order to get the ending loan value, we just take the beginning loan value, add to it this negative principal, the amount of principal being paid down, and you can see the value of our loan is decreasing. And so we're almost ready to send these formulas all the way down, but we need to do one thing here. This beginning loan value in the second period will actually be the ending loan value in the first period. The rest of these formulas we should be able to drag down like so. Highlight the entire row, send those all the way down. You can see the amount of principal that we're paying each month is going up. And the amount of interest we're paying each month is going down. That's what you would expect, and that helps me to think that we've done something right here. But the ultimate check is that by the time we get to the 360th payment, the last payment, the ending loan value should be 0. So let's go all the way down and see if that's the case. Well, you can see that indeed by the time we get to the 360th payment, we are in fact paying off the loan. The loan value goes to 0. So all this is doing is this is simply confirming that what we've done up here is accurate. Now, like I said, this for me is not the amortization table that I want us to use as our final amortization table. We're going to tweak this a little bit. And so I'm actually going to get rid of all of that. And we're going to come over here and we're going to allow ourselves a couple of other input variables up here. And what are those extra input variables going to be? Well, the extra input variables are going to be this: amount of extra payment per period. That's going to be very useful. We're also going to say if we make extra payments each period, then what's our total payment per period? And then I also want to know, once we know what our total payment per period is, then I want to know total periods to retire the loan. And then what we want to do is we want to figure out some savings that are going to come from this. So in order to do that, in order to figure out the savings that are going to come from each of this, we're going to want to figure out a couple of extra variables. So here's the extra variables that we want to figure out. Over here, I'm going to figure out what's the total payments we're making on this loan. That's pretty easy. The total payments that we're making on this loan is just going to be the periodic payment times the number of years times the payments each year. So on this $190,000 loan, the borrower is actually making payments totaling $336,486.89. Well, over here we'll do the same thing. We'll say, okay, what are the total payments? So let me just show you how this can work. What if we decide that every month we're going to pay an extra $100? So I would put a negative 100 right there, and I'm going to come over here. And I'm just going to make sure the formatting is the same. Although I don't need a green background, that's actually going to be yellow because that'll be a user input. So the total payments per period, if we do that, would be our original payment plus this extra payment. That's going to be an output, so I'll highlight that in green. And now what we're going to figure out is, okay, if we pay an extra $100 every month, how many total payments are we going to have to make in order to retire this loan? So we're going to need a formula again. I'm going to come back into the financial, and what we're going to need is the N per formula. That's going to tell us the number of periods it will take to retire this loan. So we'll put that in there. It's going to say, all right, what's your rate? Well, again, it's going to be APR divided by payments per year. What's the payment? Well, there's our total payment. What's the present value? It's the $190,000. We want to reduce it. We want to retire this loan at the end of all the payments. So we want to put a 0 future value. And for the type, we're going to make payments at the end of the period. So you can put in a 0 or you could leave it blank. And you can see that it's going to take us 297 payments. Now, if you wanted to, you could figure out the years, right? You could say, how many years is that? Well, it'd be just that would be that divided by 12. And, maybe that looks a little ugly, so just give it some decimal points. So in other words, it's going to take you 298 payments in order to retire this loan. And that's going to be 24.77 years. So you shave off about 5 years. Well, let's figure out what are the total payments over the life of this loan. And those are also green since those are outputs. So what are the total payments? Well, it's going to be your total payment times the total periods to retire the loan. And you can see it's $307,544.64. So what are my savings? Well, instead of paying $336,000, we're paying $307,000. So the total savings, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to subtract that original amount. And you can see that our total savings is $28,942.25. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and create our amortization table. In the amortization table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another column here. And I'm going to say, if this is our required payment, what are the excess payments? So I'm going to give us the option to make excess payments in this amortization table. So I'll center all this. And also what I want to do in this amortization table is I want it to be flexible. In other words, I only want it to show us the number of periods that we need in order to pay off the loan. So if we pay off the loan in the 298th payment, which is what would happen here, then I don't want to see 360 periods. I only want to see 298 periods. So the way that we're going to make this happen is, well, we're obviously going to need the first period, so I'll just type in a 1 here. But from this point forward, this is how we're going to make it happen. It's going to be some nested if-then statements. And the first if-then statement is this. If that previous period equals nothing, then I don't want to see a period, because what it means is if this previous period is blank, that means we've already paid off the loan. So I don't want to see a period here. So that's the first part of the if-then statement. What if that's not true, however? What if there is a period in this previous cell? Then what I want to do is this. I want to say if the ending loan value in the previous period equals 0, then give me nothing. And if that's not the case, so in other words, if it looks up here and it sees a year, so that means it shoots us over to this part of the formula, then it looks up here and it doesn't see a 0, then we haven't paid off the loan yet. And if that's the case, we need one more year. So take this previous year and add 1 to it. That formula should make it so that we only see the periods that we need to see, but it's also going to require that we have to do something special over here with the ending loan value, and I'll show you that in just a second. It's telling me that I made a mistake. I forgot to put a parenth at the end there, so all it did was it added one more parenth for us. Not a big deal, just me being a little bit lackadaisical and forgetting the parenth at the end. Okay, so you can see right now it's not showing us anything because it's seeing a 0 ending loan value over here. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to create formulas just for this first row, and then I'm going to redo the formulas in the second row, and it will be the second row formulas that I shoot all the way down. So in the first row, the beginning loan value is just the amount to finance. The required payment is going to be this number right there. The excess payment will be that number right there. The interest in the first row is just going to be beginning loan value times APR divided by payments per year. Principal is going to be simply the sum of all of that right there. What I mean by that is if you take the required payment plus the excess payment, that's going to give you the total payments per period. And then if you just add that to this interest, that'll take the difference, right? Because these are two negatives, that's a positive. So by adding all of it up, we should get a negative number that will represent the amount of principal being paid down. So that number right there is just those two, which are negative, with this positive added together. And so that tells you how much of all of this payment is going to pay down the principal on the loan. So then the ending loan value, right, would just be the beginning loan value plus the principal. And so you can see our ending loan value is actually decreasing, and you can see, by the way, that this formula worked, because now that there's a number in the ending loan value, now we can see that there's a second period. Okay, all right, in the second row here, what we're going to do for beginning loan value is this. We're going to say if that year equals nothing, then that means the loan has been paid off already, and we don't need to see a beginning loan value, and we'll just put nothing here. Just as a reminder, double quotation marks equals nothing in Excel. However, if that's not the case, if we do see a year, comma, then we're just going to come up here and grab this ending loan value. Very simple, straightforward formula. And this formula is also going to be very similar. We're going to say if the year equals nothing, or I should say if the period equals nothing, give me nothing. Otherwise, we want this number right here, and let's lock it in. Very similar over here. If the period equals nothing, give me nothing. Otherwise, I want this excess payment, and we want to lock it in. On the interest, we're going to say also, if the period equals nothing, give me nothing. Otherwise, we want to take the beginning loan value and multiply it by the annual interest rate, the APR, divided by the payments per year. And both of those need to be locked in because they're in the input table. Close all the parentheses up, hit enter. And for the principal, we want to say if the period equals nothing, again, give me nothing. Otherwise, add up all of the payments and the interest, again, recognizing that you have opposite symbols. That's why we're adding it. And again, I forgot the parent just like I did before. Okay, for the ending loan value, it's going to require a little bit more involved formula, but it's not bad. We're going to say if the period equals nothing, then again, give me nothing. However, if there is a period, then we're going to do another if-then statement. If you take this beginning loan value and you add to it the principal paydown, remember they have opposite signs, that's why we're adding. If that's greater than 0, then we in fact want to just see what that number is. We just want B14 plus F14. What if, however, that number is less than 0? If that number goes below 0, which can happen, because if we're making extra payments, then maybe our last payment makes slightly more of a payment than it needs to, right? Which is okay, and we could go in and make a more complicated formula, but we're just going to let our excess payment perhaps be a little too much than what it needs to be in the last period. But if that happens, if all of this right here completely pays off the loan and a little bit extra, then it could take the value of the loan negative. We don't want that. So what we're saying then is if you take B14 and add F14 and it's not greater than 0, then we just want to zero out the loan. We just want to make the ending value of the loan 0. Close out the parentheses, and we shouldn't need to lock anything in that formula. It's always a good idea to format it, so we'll turn this into a currency. Now, all of these formulas right here, we should be able to run down. Now, I'm not a stickler as to how far you want to run it down. The longest loans usually are 30-year loans with 12 payments per year, so you at least want to give it 360 periods. But you know, some people are actually taking out 40-year loans, so maybe you want to take it 480. Maybe you want to take it 500. Whatever you do, let's just take it down quite a ways so that we can handle large loans. So I'm going to take it all the way down to 500 rows. We'll probably never use that, but it can't hurt to have it that far down. Okay, so we come up here, and I'm going to center all of this as well. Okay, so let's see how our amortization table is working. Maybe the first thing we should do, just to make sure that it's actually working properly, is let's say we're not going to make any extra payments. We've zeroed out the amount of extra payments, so this amortization table should be very similar to what we did before. So our check is to see that at the end of the 360th period, this loan should be paid off. So if we go down and find our 360th period, what you can see is it doesn't quite get paid off, but it's essentially paid off. So our amortization table looks like it's doing fine. Now notice it's going to take you one extra row. That's just because right here, even though it looks like it's 0, there's an infinitesimal amount that's still not paid off, but trust me, the bank's going to forgive you that amount. So for all intents and purposes, this amortization table is doing its job. The loan is paid off, and we can just kind of ignore this last row here. If you wanted to, you could go in and fix that. If you're thinking to yourself, that really annoys me, then instead, to fix this, what you would do is you would go into the formula over here, and you would say, not if, so right here it's saying, right, if the previous year equals nothing, give me nothing. Otherwise, go look at the ending loan balance. And what we said is if that ending loan balance equals 0, then don't give me a period. Well, you could say instead of equaling 0, you could do this. If it's less than 50 cents, you could do something like that. If it's less than 50 cents, then don't give me any more periods. And that would actually fix the problem for you, I'm pretty sure. Come back down here to our 360th period, and you can see, in fact, it stops. So if that makes you feel better, fantastic. Okay, now what we want to do is we just want to play around with it a little bit and see if it works. So what if we pay $25 extra per month? And remember, you need to put this in as a negative here. So what if you make $25 of extra payments each month? Then what is that going to do for us? Well, it's showing us up here that it should shave off about a year and a half. It's going to save you about $8,500. So we want to see if our spreadsheet's working right. So we should pay this off on the 342nd payment. So if we scroll down to the 342nd payment, you can see, in fact, that this is getting zeroed out. It only gets better. What if you can make an extra $200 of payments each month? Then it really shortens it considerably. Now you're paying it off in the 255th payment, and you're saving $47,939.07. Now, one of the nice things about this, once you've saved this, right, and if you want to format it, you can. I'll show you how to format it. Once you've saved this, then you can actually come in and you can start saying, well, okay, I'll make $200 worth of extra payments each month, but what if at the end of the first year I'm actually going to try to dump in, maybe I'm going to dump in an extra payment of $2,000. What does that do for me? Well, you can see what it's going to mean for you. Instead of paying off the loan in the 255th payment, you'll pay it off in the 251st payment. So that just shows you how you can use the spreadsheet, how you can figure out your monthly payment on a loan, how you can put together the amortization table, and how you can figure out exactly what your principal payments and interest payments are going to be each month, and how much more quickly you would pay it off if you made some extra payments each month, and most importantly, how much you could save by making those extra payments each month. And last thing I want to show you is just how you can quickly format this thing. I really wouldn't do too much with it. Maybe I would center this across everything, so I would just highlight that, go into the format cells, which is just right-click format cells, or you can hit Control-1. That's the hotkey. And then I would come down here to center across selection, and I might do something like that. And maybe just to make it a little bit more readable, I might put in some dashes. And I might put that on both sides of it. That just, again, helps it to be a little bit more readable. And if you do that, you're going to have to put a apostrophe in front of that. Not a big deal. Might actually make that a little bit bigger, so maybe I'll make it 14 size font since it's my heading. And you can also give it maybe a border and maybe a little bit of color. Not too much, though. You don't want too much color going on in your spreadsheets. So that just gives me my title for my spreadsheet. And then maybe lastly, you want to put some boxes around this stuff down here. But be careful, because if you just highlight it and go and click up here, then even if there's no content, it's still going to show you a box. And we really only want this thing formatted if it's got content. So you might want to use what I call conditional formatting. So I would come up here and I would highlight all the way down to our 500th row, and I would do conditional formatting, do a new rule, and I would say format only cells that contain no blanks. And then how do I want it formatted? Well, maybe I want to put a border around it like so. And so if you do that, then what it's going to look like is this. You're going to have borders around everything. And if you wanted to, you could try to make the labels, give it a little bit of color as well, just to offset it. Same thing on this side. You could say, well, maybe I want the period to be offset. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting because, again, I only want it formatted if I'm actually seeing the period. So give me a new rule. Same thing. Format only cells that contain no blanks. This time on the formatting, maybe I want to fill it with just a little bit of gray. Looks like that. So now if I come up, now my table looks like that. And the cool thing is, what if you're buying a car? So what if you're paying, it's a $25,000, maybe it's a $25,000 car. Maybe you're bringing a 10% down payment. Maybe the APR is 5%. Usually car loans are only over 5 years, and maybe it's 12 payments per year. All right, so your periodic payment is going to be $424.60. Maybe you're going to try to make $200 of extra payments each month. So you're really only going to end up paying for 40 months. So the cool thing is if you use the conditional formatting, we can scroll down. You can see you're paying this off in the 40th month, and you can see there's nothing else after that. We don't see any numbers. We don't see any formatting. It just confines it entirely to the period that we want to see. So that's how you can do a loan amortization table. Hopefully you find it useful, and it's very easy to do in Excel.